For further analysis, we have joining us Dr. Bong Young-shik from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. It's good to have you on the show today.
Pleased to be here.
So Kim Jong-un has sent this surprising message to President Moon as a kind of end-of-year greeting. I understand there's never been this kind of end-of-year personal message that a North Korean leader has sent to the South before.
Right. So this is a very important sign that Chairman Kim Jong-un wants to maintain the personal ties with the leader of South Korea with a very rich personal chemistry they have built through 3 summit meetings in the year of 2018. It is very important for North Korea to keep South Korea as a strategic card that can be interposed between North Korea and the United States, because without South Korea on board to represent North Korea's view that economic cooperation between the 2 Koreas will be very conducive to making progress toward the complete denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula, rather than weakening the leverage on North Korea for denuclearization. So it is very important for Mr. Kim Jong-un to maintain a very positive relationship with the South Korean government. And as released recently by the survey companies, that about 70% of South Korean public is for Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul, which is very important strategic asset for Kim Jong-un to use if the conditions are ripe, because the cancellation or no realization of his expected visit to Seoul toward the end of this year was a big disappointment to the Moon Jae-in government of South Korea. So by dangling this strategic card to the Moon Jae-in government of South Korea, Kim Jong-un government wants to maintain its strategic value for future inter-Korean dialogue and negotiations in the year 2019.
Why do you think Kim has sent this kind of message now? I mean, we know that just tomorrow, Kim will be delivering his New Year's Day speech, laying out the regime's policy direction for the next year. I mean, do you think this message perhaps previews what we're going to hear tomorrow?
Well, I wouldn't make too much out of the actual content of this personal letter to President Moon Jae-in of South Korea, because first, the Blue House, the President's Office of South Korea, did not disclose the full content of the personal letter by Chairman Kim Jong-un. That means that there's no new or groundbreaking message with regard to North Korean regime expressing a new message with regard to complete denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. If there were new message about denuclearization, then the Blue House would not have waited or wasted no time to share the news with the South Korean public. I guess it's a personal letter. So the message is a very personal, warm message toward President Moon Jae-in that national solidarity between the 2 Koreas must be the central foundation of overcoming, joint effort to overcome any obstacles for peaceful unification and the peaceful coexistence. And if you shed a negative light on this message, then it is attempts by North Korean leadership to kind of drive wedge between Washington and Seoul in undermining their joint concerted effort to deal with North Korea's WMD programs.
But doesn't the fact that this letter is directed at Moon Jae-in, and supposedly, according to the Blue House spokesperson, as you said, we haven't been able to see the full letter ourselves, but according to the details, it's about hoping for a Seoul summit next year and hoping to continue the reconciliation process and even the denuclearization talks next year. Doesn't that suggest, though, that tomorrow, at least, when we hear the New Year's Day speech, it will signal towards similar themes of further reconciliation and further denuclearization talks?
I believe so, because it is in the interest of North Korean regime to maintain the momentum of inter-Korean dialogue and potential joint economic effort, cooperation, especially the railroad modernization and reconnection projects. So it is very important for North Korean leadership to keep the South Korean public's opinion in favor of continuing dialogue and negotiation with North Korea in the new year. But let me just cite a line from Shakespeare's Hamlet that it is time for both Koreas to have more matters with less art. Inter-Korean events are great in terms of great antics and dramatic effects, appeal to emotions, but this is time for both Koreas to get things moving in the right direction toward citing Chairman Kim Jong-un's own words, toward peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. But we have not seen any concrete results in terms of complete denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. And because of lack of additional denuclearization action taken by Pyongyang, economic sanctions on North Korea remains in place. And as a result, inter-Korean economic cooperation projects have not been moving forward. So it is not so important to assess the accountability. Who is to blame? Somebody can blame the United States being too hardline. Somebody can blame North Korea not moving forward with the denuclearization actions. But most important reality for North Korea and South Korea to a lesser extent is that things have been stalled since the summer of 2018, and we have to assess who will be the biggest loser if things are not moving forward.
You say things are stalled. I think that's most stalled between North Korea and the US. Because the denuclearization talks have not been going forward as many had hoped. And this, again, let me go back to this New Year's Day speech tomorrow. There are some who are hoping that there's some sort of movement Kim Jong-un will show towards shifting this stalled situation. But there are other experts who say actually the North Korea are unlikely to make any message about the US for now, because that's a card they'll want to keep in their pocket for future negotiations. What do you think will happen on that front tomorrow?
Well, it'll be great if there's a eye-opening new proposal and promises made by Chairman Kim Jong-un in the New Year's message, which will be announced tomorrow. But it'll be very difficult for Kim to make clear position with regard to North Korea's intentions on denuclearization, because judging from the message announced by the Korean Central News Agency only a couple of weeks ago, then it was made clear by North Korean government that the concept of complete denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula includes the withdrawal of U.S. forces from South Korea. Because as long as the U.S. forces are stationing on the sovereign soil of South Korea, then South Korea can always mobilize American nuclear weapons at any moment. So it is absurd and unfair from the standpoint of North Korea that United States demands denuclearization of North Korea without taking responsive measures. But termination of alliance with the United States is something that is unthinkable for South Korea. So as long as Kim Jong-un regime maintains the traditional position of North Korean regime that the price of North Korea's denuclearization in verifiable and complete manner is the termination of U.S.-ROC security alliance, then it is a non-starter for any further negotiations between Washington and Pyongyang in the new year. So there should be some more flexibility demonstrated by Kim Jong-un in his delivery of New Year's message tomorrow. But since Kim Jong-un has declared in the New Year's message this year, January 1st, 2018, that nuclear weapons is the precious sword that will protect the security and survival of the Republic, North Korea as a sovereign country, then I doubt Kim Jong-un is really ready to make any significant compromise with regard to North Korea's ballistic missiles and nuclear warheads.
So we'll have to see what comes out of that message tomorrow. Before we finally move on, this this end-of-year message, do you think Kim Jong-un would have sent one to any other countries, perhaps China or perhaps even the US to President Trump?
I don't think so. Maybe sending a personal letter or some secret message to Trump administration after the announcement of the New Year's message is possible, but it is related to the choice of timing of North Korea's intentions to be aggressive in realizing another summit meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump, which has been stalled. And North Korea's position has been quite ambiguous about moving together with the United States to realize a summit meeting. So I rather pay attention to the other potential messages in his speech tomorrow, which is whether he will admit pains for North Korean people under the economic sanctions in the year 2018, or his remarks on the energy situations in North Korea. That if the New Year's message would include those elements, then they will show that North Korea has been suffering greatly under the economic sanctions.
Okay, it's the end of the year now. Let's take a look back at the events of 2018. And actually, let's go back to exactly 1 year ago, the December 31st of 2017. And if we go back then, I don't think we could have imagined everything that would have happened this year. 3 inter-Korean summits, the first ever North Korea-US North Korea summit, and various other inter-Korean exchanges that we've seen. But despite this, some would argue that not much has changed either, because North Korea hasn't really taken significant steps towards denuclearizing despite these kind of interactions. How do you assess what's happened over the last year?
Well, let me apply some psychology here, that when you have high hope, then the disappointment will be also greater. So if you shrink your bar, amount of expectation, then you will not be so disappointed. And if you just apply very conservative measuring stick to 2018, then first, North Korea has not engaged in any military provocations to South Korea or Japan. North Korea has not conducted another nuclear or ballistic missile test. And there, as you said, that numerous summit meetings between North Korean leadership and outside world with the United States for the first time, and 3 times with South Korean president, and 3 times with China. So these are not small achievements for 2018. But if you apply higher measuring stick, then yes, the denuclearization negotiations between North Korea and the United States have been, unfortunately, almost totally stopped since the summer of 2018. And there's a growing number of reports that North Korea has secretly engaged in proliferation activities. And North Korea actually has declared in Korean Workers' Party's general meetings in April in 2018 that North Korea has achieved nuclear power state capability, that now North Korea does not need any actual underground nuclear tests, but it can just rely on subcritical tests in order to increase the number of nuclear warheads. That might be the activity that North Korea has secretly carried out. So we have to wait and see where we are standing at the beginning of the new year.
And then looking ahead to the new year, what do you think we should be looking out for? I mean, how do you think the mood will continue towards reconciliation, or is there a risk that things could turn sour again?
Well, I don't want to be a pessimist on the final day of 2018, but I have to make some pessimistic predictions for several reasons. One, patience are running out for leaderships. President Trump needs to show concrete result after the November midterm election in the United States. And Kim Jong-un has to make a progress. Otherwise, it's economy, which is already tanked under the pressure of economic sanctions, will not satisfy the circle of power elites in North Korea. And second, checks and balance inside the Trump administration is wobbly. Good example is the departure of Secretary of Defense James Mattis. So decision-making style of Trump administration will be far more unpredictable, which is not good for stability on the Korean Peninsula. And South Korea and the United States are head-to-head in coming up with the agreement on the burden sharing. And the lame duck syndrome comes really early for President Moon Jae-in of South Korea, as well demonstrated by the illegal surveillance scandal of the Blue House. So, and final point is that South Korean economy worries South Korean public. So South Korean public's attention will be moving away from inter-Korean affairs to their own, living conditions. When you combine all these things, then 2019 is not unlikely to be as positive and productive as the year 2018, but it is more likely to be year 2017 when things are very edgy and hostile.
That's where we'll have to wrap things up, I'm afraid. But Dr. Bong, thank you for coming in today and also coming in throughout 2018. And we hope to have you back on the show in 2019 as well.
Definitely. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.